Dating advice.
Ethan, Chloe.
Welcome to Dating Advice, everyone. I'm Ethan.
And hello, I'm Chloe.
Let's jump into today's case.
Well, I have reason to believe that he's been involved with other women, and we have 2 children. We've only been married 2 years,
Okay.
and I'm devastated.
All right. How old are your children?
They are 2 and 6 months.
Oh, you have little babies.
We do.
Okay.
We do.
All right. So you said you have reason to believe. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, we're in the pool business. My husband, soon to be ex-husband, is in the pool business, and you know, he's going out to these pools after they're finished. I mean, these women are in their bikinis. They're laying out. Why does he need to be over there? He's saying that he's just servicing. I don't know what he's servicing. But
Servicing the pool after hours?
That's a good question. So, yeah, I mean, I looked at his phone one day. I mean, it was just because I needed to check on something because I'm in the business too. I'm the secretary.
Okay.
And there's these women, these customers that are texting him. And I mean, I can't even repeat what some of these texts
The customers that are in the swimsuits?
So they're the women of these pools that have been put in, and they're texting him long after the pools have been put in.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what are you seeking here today?
Well, basically, I just can't bring my children up in this kind of situation. And I basically want to leave with the children. And, you know, he makes a lot of money. Our business makes a lot of money. But when I leave, I'm not going to have that. So I need to keep the lifestyle that my children and I have had. They go to private school, and we have a nanny. And so I need to continue that so that their lives aren't disturbed. And we live in a house, $500,000, and I need to maintain something similar so that it's not a big adjustment for any of us.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. Private school, do you all pay tuition for that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. How much is it? If you were to break it down monthly, because I know tuition sometimes isn't a monthly thing.
It's about $1,800 a month.
$1,800. What kind of private school is it?
It's a good private school.
Oh my gosh. They teaching the baby how to drive?
Well, the baby's not there yet, but he will
Well,
be.
the 2-year-old, right?
Well,
That's still a baby for $1,800.
It's a tuitional. I mean, you grow with the school. So
What about the nanny? How much does she cost monthly?
I mean, he pays most of the bills, so he can probably answer that better.
Okay. Have you already started looking at other homes, other apartments, or anything like that?
Yeah, you know, there's a couple other homes in the neighborhood that I'd really like to move into. I think that would be the least disruptive to me and to the kids.
Okay.
So, yeah. And
would you be renting out those homes?
basically, I would like to buy one.
Okay.
So that we can maintain the same lifestyle that we've had.
Okay. If you were to buy a home, the homes that you were looking at, what are you looking at on mortgage?
About $3,000 a month.
Okay.
But again, I mean, I would think he would need to pay the majority of that.
Okay. So you want him to buy you a home? You and the children a home?
I mean, I would call it spousal support. Yeah.
Okay. What about any other bills that you would potentially have to pay?
So I think he should keep paying for the nanny and the private school.
Okay.
And, you know, I have been only working part-time. And of course, I would not want to keep working in the business with him and these customers who are still coming around. So I would have to find a job, and that could take a really long time. So I would think he should pay everything until I find something where I can work part-time.
All right. Is there anything else you want me to know before I move over to him?
Well, just don't believe his excuses about these women. That's all I can say.
Oh, okay. All right, Mr. Harper.
Well, there's no excuses about any of the women. I had developed this business long before we got married.
Okay.
And we've been married a couple of years. And I've worked hard to get this business to where it is. I've got a great staff. I've got a great team of crews out there working. And one of the things that I do is I go out and I make sure the work's quality work so I can put my name on it. Do I take care of my clients after we've put in a pool? Absolutely.
Well, your definition of taking care, is it what she's thinking?
No.
Okay.
It's I maintain contact with my clients, and they contact me if there's an issue, if they've got questions.
He maintains contact.
And I go out and I see those clients because that tends to give me more referral business. And I'm not having to spend as much on marketing and advertising as I would. I will say this. She has imagined a lot of stuff that goes on.
She has a good imagination.
Very good.
Oh,
and
okay.
she does work part-time as the secretary, but her primary job is to take care of the kids.
Okay, so you'll agree with everything she said about taking care of the kids and everything like that.
And she does a fairly good job when she's there.
Oh, what does that mean?
Primarily, the nanny does all the work for taking care of the kids.
Speaking of the nanny, how much do you pay her a month?
We're actually paying her probably a little less than what we deserve, but it's probably about $1,200 a month.
Okay.
And
so you make pretty good money. How much money do you make in this pool business?
Well, I've been averaging about $280 a year.
But it could be higher?
It could be.
Or it could be lower?
It depends on the market.
Okay.
He's not even being truthful about that. He makes over 300.
He makes over 300? Okay. Is that true, Mr. Harper?
No, that's not true.
So where did she get that from?
Well, I mean, it's her lifestyle. I mean, she likes going out and with her girlfriends and having her lunches and having her, her spa days and
Therapy sessions.
She pay. I pay
You
for.
You call your spa days therapy sessions?
No, I'm going to therapy because of what he's putting me through.
Oh.
That's important to me. I want the kids to be safe. I want the kids to be brought up in a good, wholesome environment.
Wholesome.
And she,
You're not
she
even
gives
home
everything
at
off to the
night.
nanny.
Ma'am, let him speak. I gave you an opportunity to speak. He did not interrupt you while you were speaking. I promise I will get back to you. Continue, Mr. Harper.
She doesn't, she pretty much hands everything off to the nanny and requires the nanny to take care of all that. She's got a pretty cozy lifestyle. We've got a nice house. I'd like to keep the kids, with me.
No.
And make sure they're taken care of because she's too busy taking care of herself.
All right. But your work schedule, would that permit you to have the children on a full-time basis?
It would be difficult, but I would see it, made sure it happened.
So wouldn't it be in the best interest of the children for them to just stay with mom like they've always been doing?
Well, if mom would stay with them, yeah, I would agree with that. But it's, like I said, it's primarily the nanny.
But, okay. Well, this is what I am going to do. I definitely think that your wife has grounds. She's eligible to receive some sort of spousal maintenance, especially if she no longer wishes to remain in the home with you. Had she wished to remain in the home, this would probably be a different type of situation. She may still be entitled to some spousal maintenance, just probably not as much. So what I'm going to do is to order you pay spousal maintenance to your wife. And it's not going to be anything that's, forever, ma'am. I just want you to understand that it will definitely be a temporary situation, at least to get you on your feet so you can look for a job, find suitable living arrangements for the children and everything like that. So first, let's start with child support. You said your yearly income is about $280,000 a year. So that would put you, even if it's at $300,000, ma'am, in Texas, he caps. So his gross would be based on $12,325.35, which would make his net resources $9,200. Now, sir, are these the only two children you have?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So $9,200.
Supposedly.
Well, that has nothing to do with me. We can review that at a later date, but as of today, that has nothing to do with me. So when we look at your income, that brings your net resources to about $8,891. And we look at your income, that brings your net resources to about $8,891. You have 2 children. So if we multiply that by 25%, that brings your child support amount to $2,222.75. Now, your wife testified, and you really didn't disagree with her, that you testified about the nanny costing $1,200 a month. I'm going to order that you keep paying that. The private school is $1,800 a month. I'm going to order that you keep paying that. Wife also testified that the mortgage potentially for the next home will be about $3,000. I'm not going to order him to pay all of that. I'm not going to order him to pay all of that because, ma'am, you will be working and you should be able to maintain something. I'm not going to have him just 100% take care of you. Spousal maintenance is to assist. It's not to help you, just live off of him for a long time. So spousal maintenance is going to be in the amount of $4,500. I gave you a credit for that $309 with the health insurance. So that brings your monthly obligation for child support and spousal maintenance to $6,800 a month.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today into a really, really specific situation. We've got details pulled, directly from a divorce court case.
Right. And our source material, it's not just the raw court stuff, though we have excerpts from transcripts, hearing from the people involved, the judge.
Yeah, we also have analysis and commentary from different sources, people who reacted to what actually happened in that courtroom.
Exactly. So our goal here really is to walk through this case. It involves a couple we'll call Mr. and Mrs. Harper, and try to understand the claims they made, how they responded to each other.
See what the judge actually decided based only on the material we have in front of us.
And then, and this is key, look at how these external sources interpreted that ruling. Because honestly, it brings up some big questions about evidence, financial expectations in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when it all falls apart?
It really does. It's a snapshot, isn't it, of the legal system trying to handle these super personal dynamics and the money side of things, too. Messy stuff.
Definitely. So let's set the scene. Mr. and Mrs. Harper, married, but only for 2 years.
Wow. Short marriage. And young kids.
Very young.
Yeah.
A 2-year-old and a 6-month-old baby. And Mrs. Harper, she stated her reason for leaving the marriage.
Okay. What was it?
She said she had, and this is the phrase used, reason to believe Mr. Harper was involved with other women.
Involved how? Like specifically?
Specifically clients from his pool business. That was her claim.
Okay, so that's the trigger she cited. But this reason to believe, what was it actually based on, according to the sources? What did she present in court as, evidence?
Well, the transcript bits we have mention things like him visiting clients after hours.
After hours. Which, depending on the business, that could be totally normal, right? Quality check? Follow-up call?
Could be.
Ugh.
One source we looked at actually pointed that out, suggesting it might just be standard business practice,
Yeah.
not necessarily suspicious on its own.
Right. What else did she mention?
Her other points included seeing women in bikinis at these pools he serviced.
Okay. Pools, summer, people wear bikinis. That feels, I don't know, less like hard evidence and more like, well, people at a pool.
That's a fair point. And she also brought up text messages, texts from female customers that she felt were suggestive.
Suggestive texts. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you put that all together, the after-hours visits, the bikinis, the texts she felt were suggestive. How did the sources analyzing this case describe that collection of evidence?
Yeah, this is where one source definitely had a strong take. They described this evidence as feeling, quote, a bit thin.
Thin. Okay.
More like suspicion than hard proof, was their phrasing. They used terms like circumstantial whispers.
Circumstantial whispers.
And pretty pointedly called it a flimsy tale.
Flimsy tale. Wow, that's
Yeah.
that's pretty direct language from a source looking at her claims. Sounds like they thought the foundation for her belief, at least what came out in court, was shaky.
That seems to be the interpretation from that particular viewpoint, yes. But look, based on this reason to believe, flimsy or not, in one source's view, she had some very specific demands, what she felt she needed after leaving, especially with those little kids.
And those demands, they were significant, weren't they? She wanted custody, naturally, given the kids' ages, but her financial goal was stated very clearly.
Yeah, she said, I need to keep the lifestyle that my children and I have had. Maintaining that lifestyle was central.
And she put numbers on it, specific costs.
Oh, yes. She wanted the children to stay in private school. Said that cost $1,800 a month.
$1,800 a month for a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. Private school. That feel like something a source might flag as a pretty hefty expense for kids that young?
It's definitely a notable cost. She also wanted to keep the nanny. That was another $1,200 a month, she stated.
Okay, so private school, nanny, another big ongoing expense.
And then the big one, maybe, housing. She said she needed help buying a new house, something similar to their current one, which was valued around $500,000.
$500,000. And the mortgage for this new place.
She estimated that would be around $3,000 a month.
Right. So let's recap. Keep the kids, maintain the exact lifestyle, which means funding for private school for toddlers, a full-time nanny, and a $3,000 monthly mortgage for a new $500,000 house. All stemming from this reason to believe.
That's the picture painted by her demands. And she backed this up by arguing her own earning power was limited. She said she only worked part-time as a secretary in his business, actually.
Okay. So she's positioning herself as needing significant support because she couldn't just, go out and earn enough to cover all these costs immediately.
Exactly. She stated she needed time to find her footing, employment-wise. Even suggested finding a job could take a really long time.
A really long time.
And she even tied some of her personal expenses, things like spa days, therapy, directly to his alleged behavior, essentially arguing he should pay for those too, because in her view, he caused the need for them.
Wow. Spa days and therapy costs blamed on his supposed actions. That's drawing a very direct line from suspicion to financial compensation for personal care. What about her own financial contributions? Did she mention those?
She mentioned handling house bills and the kids' insurance. But the source transcript does highlight that the kids' insurance costs she cited was, just $39 a month.
$39 a month. Okay, so on her side, claims based on what one source called circumstantial whispers, really extensive financial demands to keep up a high-cost lifestyle, private school, nanny, new house, justified partly by saying she needs a long time to find work and blaming him for personal expenses. That's quite the setup.
It is. Now, let's flip it. Mr. Harper's response. How did he push back against all this?
Yeah, he definitely didn't just roll over and accept her narrative or her demands, did he?
Not even close. First off, he flat out denied any affairs. Completely. Said no excuses about any of the women.
So a total denial of the core accusation. What about the after-hours client visits?
He framed those purely as business. Quality control, keeping in touch with clients for referrals. He called it standard business stuff and said, it tends to give me more referral business.
So, presenting a completely non-scandalous business reason for the very behavior she found suspicious.
Precisely. And he directly addressed her reason to believe. He characterized her belief by saying she had a good imagination.
Ouch. A good imagination.
And stated she has imagined a lot of stuff. So he's painting her suspicions as basically unfounded fantasy, directly contradicting her story.
Okay. What about the practical stuff, like the nanny?
They did agree on the cost. $1,200 a month for the nanny. They both acknowledged that. And he agreed she worked part-time in the business.
But he had a different take on what her main role was, didn't he?
He did. This was interesting. He framed her main job, her primary responsibility, as being childcare.
Okay. But wait, didn't they have a nanny?
Exactly. He admitted the nanny does primarily all the work with the children. So there's this tension, right? Assigning her the role of primary caregiver, while simultaneously saying the paid help does most of the actual work. The sources definitely picked up on that.
Yeah. That's a bit inconsistent. Did he say anything else about her lifestyle or contributions?
He mentioned her cozy lifestyle and her reliance on the nanny. Seems like he was maybe trying to suggest she wasn't quite as hands-on, or perhaps that some demands were excessive given the help she had.
And income, did they agree on his earnings?
Nope, another point of disagreement. He stated his average yearly income was $280,000. She claimed it was over $300,000.
So even the fundamental income number for calculating support was up for debate. Anything else from his side?
He mentioned he handles the current house maintenance, sort of adding to his list of contributions. And significantly, he also wanted the children to live with him.
He wanted custody. Why?
He argued she was too focused on herself. And his rationale was that since the nanny was the primary caregiver anyway, the kids living with him wouldn't actually disrupt their day-to-day care routine that much.
Okay, so her side, suspicion, huge lifestyle demands, His side, total denial, business explanations, questioning her imagination and role, disputing income, and seeking custody himself. That's the tangled mess the judge had to unravel.
Exactly. Which brings us to the ruling itself. How did the judge actually handle these conflicting stories and these really significant financial demands?
Well, the judge looked closely at her claims for support, especially spousal maintenance, right? What was the judge's thinking there?
The judge acknowledged she was probably eligible for some spousal support, especially since she was moving out, needed time to find a job, that sort of thing. But, and this is crucial, the judge made it absolutely clear that any support would be temporary.
Temporary. That word keeps coming up. Sounds like the judge really emphasized that.
Absolutely. The judge used phrases like, to help her get on her feet, called it a temporary situation, specifically transitional help, and stated very clearly it was not going to be anything that's forever.
So the message was, this is a bridge, not a permanent state of affairs.
You got it. Support is temporary, a way to transition. That was the judge's frame.
Okay, temporary spousal support. What about child support? And the kids' specific expenses like school and the nanny.
Child support was ordered based on Texas state law. There's a formula, and it usually applies up to a certain income cap.
Right, a lot of places have those income caps for the standard calculation.
Yeah. In this case, the monthly net resources cap was $12,325.35. Net resources, basically income after taxes and certain deductions. For 2 kids, Texas usually sets support at 25% of the non-custodial parent's income, but only up to that capped amount.
So what did that calculate out to?
Based on his income relative to that cap, the child support order came out to $222.75 per month.
Okay, so $2,222.75 in child support, calculated by the state guideline, standard procedure.
Pretty standard, yeah. On top of that, the judge ordered Mr. Harper to keep paying the nanny that $1,200 a month.
And the private school tuition?
Ordered him to keep paying that too, the $1,800 a month.
Okay, so he's on the hook for child support, the nanny costs, the private school costs. What about her biggest demand? That $3,000 mortgage for the new house.
Now that's where the judge really drew a line. The judge explicitly did not order him to pay the full $3,000 she estimated.
Did not. Okay, so what was the decision on housing?
The judge stated she would need to chip in when she got a job.
Chip in. So the judge wasn't going to fully fund a comparable new house for her and directly tied her needing to contribute to her getting a job.
Exactly right. It really drove home that temporary nature of the support and the expectation that she needed to move towards financial self-sufficiency. The judge also gave him credit for paying the kids' health insurance. Remember that $39 a month.
Right, the $39. So, okay, let's add it all up. The calculated child support, the nanny payment, the school payment, plus some amount for that temporary spousal support. What was the total monthly obligation the judge landed on for Mr. Harper?
The transcript indicates the judge calculated his total monthly payment at approximately $6,800 per month.
$6,800 a month.
Yeah.
Wow. That covers the kids' direct expenses support, nanny, school, plus some transitional help for her, but pointedly not the full funding for her desired new house or lifestyle indefinitely. How did the judge characterize that amount?
The judge described that total sum, the $6,800, as being pretty fair given all the circumstances presented in court.
Pretty fair. And the judge didn't just leave it at the numbers, right? There was a pretty direct warning aimed at Mrs. Harper about the spousal support part.
Oh, yeah. It was stark. The judge really hammered home that the spousal maintenance was temporary and she had to actively look for work. No ambiguity.
What did the judge actually say? The sources quoted it, right?
They did. The quote cited in one source is pretty blunt. If it takes you years to find a job, that means you are intentionally not actively looking. And if he comes back in here, I will surely make sure that he stops paying you spousal maintenance.
Wow. Intentionally not actively looking. That leaves zero room for doubt about the judge's expectation. Get a job or the support stops. One source called that message crystal clear.
It certainly put her squarely on notice. This temporary help came with a very clear string attached. Find work.
Okay. So that's the case in a nutshell. Claims based on suspicion, denials, and counter-arguments about evidence and demands, leading to a judge ordering significant monthly payments but stressing temporary support, requiring her to contribute to housing, demanding she seek work, and capping it off with that sharp warning. Now, how did the outside sources react? Because this is where things get really interesting. The interpretations were, well, very different.
Yeah, wildly different. Let's start with the analysis from the source called the Dating Advice Show. Their take seemed pretty grounded in legal standards and practicalities.
They seemed a bit skeptical about her initial claims and demands from the get-go, right?
They did. They looked at her reason to believe evidence, the late visits, bikinis, texts, and basically said it doesn't feel like enough to justify demanding he buy her a whole new house.
Their point being?
Their core point was, suspicion isn't proof, especially when you're asking for major financial outcomes like funding a new $500,000 home. You generally need something more solid, more concrete than just feelings or interpretations of ambiguous situations.
Makes sense. And what about her expectation to maintain the exact same lifestyle, especially the house part?
They called that disproportionate and a stretch,
Right.
especially given that she was capable of working. They felt it really highlighted this conflict between, the emotional desire to keep things the same and the practical reality that things change after a split, and usually both people need to adjust financially.
So from that perspective, how did they see the judge's final decision? The $6,800, the temporary support, the warning?
They viewed it as a pragmatic balancing act. Like, the judge acknowledged the disruption, but also pushed firmly towards self-sufficiency. They saw temporary help, yes. Expectation to get a job, yes. Her needing to contribute to housing, yes. They concluded it seemed fair under the circumstances presented.
And the judge's very direct warning about finding work, what did they make of that bluntness?
They saw it as necessary.
Yeah.
Maybe blunt, yeah, but essential because spousal support fundamentally is supposed to be a bridge to independence, not a permanent lifestyle fund. They argued that setting that expectation so clearly avoids confusion and potential conflict down the road.
Right. So their main takeaways were suspicion isn't proof for big money demands. Temporary really means temporary. And the goal is generally for both people if they're able to become financially independent. They saw the ruling as basically upholding those ideas.
Pretty much. Now, let's pivot to the other source, Justice Gone Wild. Their reaction was dramatically different and much, much more critical.
Yeah, reading their analysis, they certainly didn't hold back on describing the case or the ruling, did they?
Not one bit. Right off the bat, they used incredibly strong language, called the whole situation and the ruling a travesty, an absurdity, a bad call, stated flat out, judgment is a travesty.
Okay, travesty. How did they describe Mrs. Harper's side, her claims and demands?
Oh, intensely negatively. They called her case a sob story, a flimsy tale, using that same phrase we saw earlier, a feelings-based hunch. Even compared it to a soap opera twist or a script for Desperate Housewives.
Wow. Soap opera twist.
They characterized her demands not as needs, but as pure entitlement, calling it a golden parachute. They were especially harsh about her stance on finding work, using phrases like a mythical quest, suggesting she presented herself as too delicate and had an apparent allergy to effort.
An allergy to effort, that's savage.
Their final take on her role was incredibly damning. They called her a grifter in a judge-sanctioned heist.
A grifter in a judge-sanctioned heist. Good grief, that's incredibly strong accusatory language. It clearly shows they believed her case was manipulative, not genuine.
Absolutely. And in stark contrast, they described Mr. Harper's offense, his presentation of facts, as grounded. They saved just as much criticism, though, for the judge's decision itself.
How did they frame the judge's ruling, then, if they saw her case that way?
They attacked it fiercely, called it a stunning leap of judicial gymnastics. They argued the judge ruled based on feelings over facts, described the ruling as basically giving her a blank check, and called the whole thing a masterclass in mixed messages, presumably because of the temporary support combined with the significant immediate payments.
And they didn't just criticize this one case in isolation, did they? They argued it had wider negative implications, especially for society, for men and women.
Absolutely. That was a huge part of their critique. They framed the ruling as a societal flashpoint with significant adverse impact.
What kind of impact?
Their arguments were things like, this ruling screams that a woman's suspicions can bankrupt a man, that it tells men their success is a liability. They felt it sent a message that emotion outranks evidence in court.
So a fundamental undermining of evidence-based justice, in their view.
Yes, and they worried it was turning courts into stages for personal vendettas. They talked about it eroding trust, causing resentment, with fairness sinks, ultimately concluding the courtroom becomes a circus.
Wow, so they saw this specific case as a prime example of unfairness, potentially ruining a man based on flimsy accusations, damaging trust between the sexes, and turning the legal process into, well, a circus. What was their final recommendation?
They explicitly called for the judgment to be reversed. They framed the outcome as rewarding opportunism over accountability.
It is genuinely fascinating and kind of jarring, honestly, to see these two sources look at the exact same court case details, the same claims, the same final ruling, and arrive at such completely opposite conclusions. One sees pragmatic fairness, pushing towards independence. The other sees an utter travesty of justice, rewarding baseless claims and creating societal harm.
It really throws into sharp relief how the lens you bring to legal decisions, maybe your underlying beliefs about relationships, money, responsibility, can totally shape how you interpret fairness or injustice.
Which kind of brings us back to you, listening to this. Why did we dive so deep into the weeds of this one specific case, looking at the facts as presented and these incredibly different reactions?
Well, because it really puts a spotlight on the tough, real-world challenges that come up when relationships end, right? It makes us think about how the legal system tries or sometimes struggles to weigh subjective claims, like that reason to believe, which is based on feelings interpretation against the need for actual concrete evidence.
And it forces you to confront those questions about financial expectations after divorce. Is the goal really to maintain the exact same lifestyle forever? Or is there, an inherent expectation that things change, that people adjust, move towards financial independence if they can?
And how does spousal support actually work on the ground? The idea is to balance immediate needs, especially with little kids involved, against that long-term expectation of independence. But this case just shows how contentious putting that idea into practice can be, how people interpret that balance so differently.
Yeah. And finally, seeing these two sources react so differently, it tells you a lot about the different perspectives floating around in society, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How do we collectively view responsibility, evidence, fairness when it comes to divorce? This case, through these two lenses, really makes you grapple with those competing views.
Definitely. So taking it all in the initial claims, the denials, the judge's specific orders, and that really sharp warning, and then these totally conflicting interpretations from our sources, it leaves you with a lot to chew on.
It really does. What does this specific case make you think about the burden of proof? In these really personal disputes, if strongly felt suspicion isn't enough for huge financial consequences, what is the right level of evidence?
Or that whole idea of maintaining a lifestyle after divorce. What does that realistically mean? And whose job is it to fund that? Especially when the circumstances, the household income, everything has fundamentally changed.
And considering those two incredibly different takes we heard, one seeing a fair, balanced approach, the other seeing a damaging injustice built on flimsy grounds,
Right.
What does that stark difference tell you about how these issues are being debated and felt in society right now?
It's complicated. And this deep dive certainly gives you plenty to think about.